Good evening. How are you all this evening? You all good? Enjoying it so far? Do you mind if I take a picture of you? You're just such a lovely looking audience. Give me a second. Thank you very much. I'm going to show that to my kids later. So my name's Mike Laurie. I run a small agency called SamyCX, and we essentially look after experiences or innovation within experiences. So we incorporate design and data practices. I'll tell you a little story. So I'll get to that slide in a minute. In about 2017, I was looking after a group of design teams, so everyone from UX designers, service designers, design researchers, writers, and we were kind of working on a big retail bank, on the web app and the website, and it was everything from how people log in and make payments to how they check their transactions or set up regular transactions. And what I found while working there was that one of the greatest sources of insight that I found was the contact center. And I used to love going in there and kind of listening to conversations that people would have with customers. So usually they'd be trying to transfer some money internationally, or they might have rung up about something they couldn't find in the app, or some sort of issue they're going through. And it was really great rich source of data. And in the bank, they used to have this team of analysts, data scientists, who would just spend most of their time studying what was going on in the contact center, because it was this kind of rich source of insight. Now, this team came to us one day very, very concerned about a certain type of call that was coming through. And this type of call was related to what's called a continuous payment authority. So a continuous payment authority, I'm going to go on a little diversion now and tell you a little bit about automated payments in banking. You get three types of payments that are automated. There's a fourth now, but we won't talk about that one. The first one is a standing order, and that's something you set up yourself, and it's been around for ages and ages. And it's something that I think it's been around since the 70s or 80s. And the industry loves it because there's a nice guarantee around it. It's very sort of formalized. You used to have to sign a little piece of paper and post it off, and the bank would set it up for you. So the industry loves that because it's all very tightly controlled. It's guaranteed. I think you can basically get your money back if things go wrong. So that's the two sources of automated payments. There's a new third one that's kind of emerged. It hasn't really been designed by anyone particular. And this is the Continuous Payment Authority. I'm going to call them CPAs from now on. CPAs they've kind of emerged out of the payments industry. They've kind of been a bit of a shadow kind of, you could think of it about as a shadow automated payment. And what it is you get all these payment gateway companies like Stripe and Braintree. I think PayPal does it as well. But because all the regulations around card payments are so intense and so expensive to kind of maintain, lots of businesses, merchants mainly, they use these payment gateways to do the payment on their behalf. So you as a merchant, when somebody sets up a regular payment with you on your card, you can charge that card as often as you like without having to abide by this regulation, because someone else does all that for you. All you need is a very special long token which you can use to authenticate on a regular basis with this payment service provider. So this whole thing has emerged over the years, and merchants absolutely love it because it's very convenient. There's all sorts of features around it. It's a huge industry, but banks it's a bit of a problem for banks, and the costs are kind of growing. And one of the biggest costs is in the contact center. So lots and lots of people were calling up, and over time this is getting bigger and bigger. And this was very, very concerning because it's kind of growing exponentially. So over a couple of years, the number of calls related to CPAs was growing. Now, these sort of continuous payment authorities, we didn't know much about them at the time. It's in 2017. So we were kind of exploring, we wanted to try and understand them more. So we listened to about 300 calls. So a group of us got together, listened to all these calls, and so over a course of a day, we'd listen to 10 calls, and then come back together and sort of recalibrate, listen to another 10 calls, and do that until we'd listened to 300 calls. So we had some categorization of those calls. And we found that a lot of these were like gym memberships, Spotify, Audible, things like that, where people just didn't realize that they committed to a monthly payment. They just thought they were doing a trial. And this was, early days of like these kinds of subscription services. And a lot of people were really, really upset about it, really, basically really pissed off, because they didn't know they'd committed to these things. Some of the most difficult ones were things like gym memberships, where you commit to like a contract to be in that gym for like a year, and the gym cost would say, let's say it would be £120 per year, but people were thinking that they were signing up for a monthly membership, and they'd cancel after 6 months, and then they'd be like, right, I don't want to have to pay this anymore, but they'd still have to go on paying it, and they'd struggle to get out of it. So we wanted to understand more about, so we listened to those calls, and we didn't quite feel we had enough colour and understanding and enough of the understanding about how people feel about this sort of payment. So we visited a bunch of people in their homes, so obviously a classic kind of, a bit like ethnographic, but it's more contextual inquiry, I suppose you'd call it. So we visited customers in their homes, and we got them to talk us through the experience of like signing up for these services and kind of how it all went. And one lady told us about how she basically couldn't buy milk for her baby 1 month because a payment had gone out that she hadn't realised, and it just took her just under what she could afford. So that was like a really kind of visceral part of like our understanding of the problem space. And so we, being kind of good designers and researchers, we thought we've got to tell this story to people within the bank. So we pulled together a video, like had this lady talking about this kind of issue. And for any of the GDPR nerds in the audience, this is all very, very tightly controlled. This is a big financial services organisation. So once we've got all that kind of emotive story, we took it to the product owner who's responsible for all the regular payments and one-off payments and international payments and things like that. And we thought we were going to tell this great story, really get their hearts kind of pounding, and like really concerned about people. But the truth was they weren't interested, because there was already so much regulatory stuff that they'd committed to for the entire year, and probably the year after, that it was very, very difficult for them to make the changes that we thought might help in this sort of situation. Now, I was dreading using this. So the product owner was brilliant. She said, yeah, we should definitely do something about this, but like we can't just solve every single problem in the bank. And literally there is like hundreds and hundreds of problems at any one time in any bank. So, but she had some time for me, and she helped me understand a bit more about this thing called benefits management. And this is a framework that's used by a lot of financial service organisations, mainly because turns out banks really love like tracking things that aren't real. Who'd have known? No. But you can search this, our benefits management framework. There's lots of different variations on it, but it's using a lot of financial services to track benefits. Fundamentally, benefits are... Oh, shit. Sorry. No? Yeah, right. Stop. So benefits are essentially measures of positive outcomes that the bank wants to see, or any organisation. It's usually enterprise. This is like... was it Pellin talking about Voltron? This is like Voltron territory. It's not Spider-Man territory. So it's the benefits are the good things that the bank wants to see, and less of the bad things. And it turns out that most financial institutions really couldn't care less about a lot of things like NPS and customer satisfaction scores and things like that. I mean, they do in a way, and they're often kind of, you could call them vanity metrics. The things that like people fundamentally really understand, really care about, are reducing costs. So one of your biggest costs is people. It's increasing sales or it's retaining customers. And most metrics you can think of will probably fit in here somewhere. You might get the odd, execs who just like things to be kind of like, nice looking and like to show their friends and family what they've done. But ultimately, it comes down to these three things. Sorry if this is news to you. So I'm going to give you, I'm going to talk you through benefits management this is a real nutshell. I think it's like there's PhDs on this stuff, but this is me trying to boil it down, because when I got to this point in our little story, I was then on a learning journey. I spoke to every business architect and business designer to learn about this, because I thought, well, this is a way to get stuff shipped. This is something that we can use. So the first thing is make a guess at the benefits case, and the benefits case itself is not necessarily about how much benefits your solution is going to bring. It's more about what's the playing field. So what's the value of the problem that you're seeing out there? So it could be in the billions, it could be in the millions, but a nice big playing field is what we're looking for. The second step is to engage the beneficiary. So you could say, well, my idea is going to grow the business by X amount of sales, but if the sales department have got a different strategy from what you're talking about, they're not going to recognize those benefits. And really, within a large organization, it's good to be recognized for the benefits that you bring. The third thing is engage the product team. So if there's a team that's already responsible for doing things in the area that you roughly think there's a solution, then you need to engage with that team, because if you just come to them with I've got this great idea, I want you to deliver it, it's very difficult to get that idea, make it a reality. So engage them early and often and tell them what you're thinking, what you're learning. But it may be that you're actually part of this team already. Now, the fourth step is essentially you make an agreement between these two parties. You basically agree whether you think the benefits are tangible and real and credible, and how those benefits are going to be essentially matured or materialized. I'll get into this in more detail in a minute, but I'm trying to be very quick. Then once you've got that interlock in place, you can you can draw down budget or an investment to be able to try and do something to get those benefits to kind of roll in almost. Then once you've done that, you can get the product team to sort of schedule it in, and then eventually the thing might be delivered, and it might be off to the races and kind of enjoy the benefits that you've reaped. So I'm going to go through these in a little bit more detail. So for our example of this problem around CPAs, right at this stage, it's just a big fat problem. We don't really know how we're going to solve it, but we might have some ideas. So the first thing to do is make an estimate. Do you remember we listened to 300 calls earlier, and 9 of them were about CPAs? So you could say that 3% of the calls into a contact center are about CPAs. You could argue that because there's 9,000 people, let's say, just to figure out of the air, working in the contact center, it's 270 full-time equivalents. That's another way of saying the equivalent of one person's effort. So this can be a measure of efficiency. You could say it's 270 people's worth of effort, this problem. So we've got an understanding of the size of the problem. So the next step is then to kind of engage the beneficiary. So for this problem, the beneficiary is the contact center, because the contact center, the execs within the contact center essentially want to increase capacity within their team. So they might want to reduce the headcount of their contact center, but they also might want to increase outbound sales calls or repurpose that kind of group of people to do something else. So it's not always about necessarily reducing headcount. It can be, use those people to grow sales. So it's not always about making efficiencies. So this benefits case then says over 4 years, because a lot of organizations will do what's known as a 4-year operating plan. So over 4 years, by 7 times 7.5 million, that's a problem, a £30 million problem for the bank. Now, you might think at this stage, like, well, what happened to all the conversation about the lady who couldn't pay for the milk and stuff? This is fundamentally about like the cost of the problem, because we want to make a very like rational, objective argument about like why we should do this, not just the human side of it. We need to do both things. So we engaged with the product team. The product owner like really started thinking about this problem, and they had enough capacity to be able to kind of do a little bit of research on the side. And if any of you read Teresa Torres's continuous discovery book, their product owner at the time was really, really into that, and she was like, "Yeah, let's speak to more people about it." And the research was happening continuously. So we started to prototype a potential solution. The PO came up with this really amazing, met this amazing startup called Minna, and they can do this thing where, how much time have I got left? I can't really tell from there. I'll try and do it quickly. They do this thing. It's a technique where they will cancel the CPA on your behalf as long as you promise to tell the merchant that you don't want to do business with them anymore. They'll do it on your behalf by assuming power of attorney. It's like a really clever little technique for acting on your behalf. So they can cancel that subscription. So that gives us the ability to then put the power in the hands of consumers and now allow them to cancel it in the app first. So potentially, if you think about that £30 million problem over 4 years, there's quite a lot of those people that are ringing us up, which could actually just do this on the phone instead, and then they wouldn't be calling us up quite so much, which is kind of like who wants to call up a contact center. So interlocking the benefits, this might be like the most like Game of Thrones bit of this whole thing, but it's true. You just need to you can't just have like a product team making changes in an app without anybody else kind of knowing that those things are happening. Because what happens at this stage if you've got a contact center that's very large like that, it needs to have a group of people who are just thinking about like what are the potential fluctuations over time, because that group of people need to put their 4YOP, their plan for the future, into a shareholder report, which will be reported on an annual basis. So they've got to have an understanding of the improvements that are being made in the app that are going to make an impact on the contact center. So they need to bake that into their forecast. So the product owner might say, "Yep, super confident about this making a dent on that problem. So you put it into your forecast, and then we'll agree with execs so that we can draw down the funding." So that's often called interlock. Come on. There we go. So now, when you want to get funding for your thing, this is where the stories come in. So we've got the jeopardy of like this being a hockey stick growth. So there's going to be tons of concern about this being a 30 million problem today, but that's going to grow over time, and it's going to get really, really scary. So that's a big monster, right, in our story. We've got a bit of the empathy of somebody not being able to meet payments at the end of the month and buy vital things for their children. And this is all like stuff that's triggering. You probably all know about how we all think we're one person with one brain, but really we're like a bunch of little brains inside our brain talking to each other. And this is all this, like the monsters and the stories and stuff, is going to really work on the reptilian brain. But we need to get a plan together for the neocortex, because that's the clever one. That's the one on the outside, the bit of the brain that's developed, the most recent. And they all have to work in combination with each other so that we can make a decision. So this is where your sort of exec comes in, where they'll agree to whether you can have the funding or not. And you might have put a budget together to say, this is how much we think we can tackle this for. And usually, and this is real language that people in banks, very senior level, use, intangible or tangible. So tangible is like if you've got a prototype and an agreement with a fintech, and it feels tangible. It feels like something that's, we could probably do that. Yep, it goes over here. And if it's like a bit narrow, a bit like, well, is that really a problem we're trying to solve? It goes in the kind of slim category. But if it's a £30 million problem, then yes, fill your boots, lads. Just go and build something. Let's go and see what you can do. And that spot, up and to the right, gives you a lot of areas of play in, because you can then say, well, we did this trial. We had this hypothesis that giving customers the control of being able to manage their own subscriptions. Our hypothesis was that would reduce calls in the contact center. You can then, if that's not true, that hypothesis, you've got kind of wiggle room within that sort of £30 million space to go and try something else. And you might have only spent like 50 or 100,000 pounds in that first, quarter, or the second half of the year, proving that kind of hypothesis out. Product team delivers. So you might do a bit more research, finesse it, do some more of the less foundational stuff that Letitia was talking about earlier, the more tactical stuff, and then the team delivers. I don't know much about that bit, to be honest. Oops. Okay. We talked about that one. Come on. So so this eventually we called it subscriptions, and we did lots of testing around the naming of it, and is it subscriptions, or is it like regular payments, or is it what is it basically? But we settled on subscriptions in the end, and this bank was one of the first, in fact the first, even before some of the fintechs, to actually put the control into customers' hands and actually deliver on this. And it only took 3 years. This is one of the quicker things that we delivered, and I think if I'd have known all this stuff about benefits that that organisation did at the time, it probably would have been a lot quicker. And now this is not to say that all companies work like this. To be honest, I've only experienced it in big financial institutions, and I think some of this sort of performance stuff that you mentioned earlier, I think will have an element of that in government as well. So I think if you tried to make it work in a small startup, they'd be like, "What are you talking about? Benefits, idiot." But big organisations kind of quite like this sort of stuff, and I'm not saying that this is the way you measure value, because value is a much broader thing. It's more about how you understand the size of the problem, really. Because if it's a small problem, then it's who's going to get excited about that? But if it's a big problem, you get lots of space to play in, lots of freedom, and it's it's much easier to get things bought. So that's it. That's benefits measurement. I'm not a huge expert on it. It's just something that I've picked up over the years. If you want to learn more about it, don't ask me about it. Search it up, and I'd love to hear what you find.